Hi, Amos here with part 2 of my Sony MDR-Z7 video. Now, if you haven't already seen it, I did an unboxing of the Z7s in my last video, and now I'm going to take a look at how they sound and maybe even why. But before I do that, let's have a look at a couple of things. I didn't unwrap the cables in my last video, so I want to have a quick look at those because there are a couple of novel things that I didn't notice when I unboxed it. First of all, if we have a look at where the cables actually plug in, Sony did some pretty nifty things with the cables. The plug itself has a, if I get the focus working, focus is going to work, has a funky sleeve, and the cups themselves, where the cable enters, are threaded. So if I push that in thus, instead of having to turn the whole plug, you only have to turn the sleeve to screw it on and attach it. This is really, really good design, I reckon, and makes them very easy to put on both sides. However, you don't need a Sony's particular plug to work with these. Ordinary 3.5mm plugs work, and I've checked already. If you're interested in how the pinout of the plugs themselves, the tip of the TRS plug is positive and the ring is negative. The sleeve doesn't appear to be connected, or else it may be connected to a shield, I don't know, but it didn't show, the multimeter didn't show anything when I tried testing for conductivity. So like if I just use, say, the plug on the other end of the cable as an example, any 3.5mm plug will fit in there as long as it's not too big. Big fat plugs like the Canair, I have to remember the model number, the big chunky Canair plugs won't fit, for example, and a couple of the other new brands will not fit either. But otherwise, really, really classy stuff from Sony, making it very easy to put together. The other thing, well, now we have to really get the other thing about the design is, of course, that you can use it with balanced amps, and of course they include a cable for their PHA3. And I got out the multimeter again, and this is basically a straight through pair of mini to minis. I mean, tip to tip, ring to ring. Sleeve is not connected, but anyone who can make a mini to mini cable, I mean, it's more or less the same kind of design, so very, very simple. Except, of course, they have wire splitters on either end. At the headphone end, both sets of cables have a soft rubbery, and the textured cable going down to the plug after the wire splitter. And neatly, the 3.5mm plug and adapter, if it's going to get back in focus for me, I should turn it where it says Sony is upright. That's a very straightforward one. No screw in this time, as a lot of manufacturers have. Focus is being bad on me. Oh, there we go. But just a push on one. So that's very easy and straightforward. And being that it has this extra bit here, which fits into the adapter, that should work with a lot of portable amps where sometimes chunky plugs can be a bit too chunky, or the sockets are a bit too close, such as, say, like the head amp, Pico Slim and that kind of thing. Anyhow, onto the sound. This is where things got interesting. Initially, the Z7 sounded quite kind of dark, strong bass, or strong mid-bass really, and the treble kind of a little bit lacking. But all the same, the interesting thing was, if we start with the bass, despite it being kind of mid-bassy, that bass was very kind of accurate, sharp, accurate and detailed with a fast decay. So in a sense, it's not visceral mid-bass that you hear through it. It's not visceral bass, but there is quite a bit of mid-bass, and that's the bass most of us hear. There is, of course, graphs up now showing the frequency response, and the frequency response tends to be pretty strong down to about 30 hertz, where then it starts to drop off, or 40, 30. So goes down pretty low before it starts to drop off. But a few comments were made when the distortion graph was shown, because there's a big spike as you head down towards 20 hertz. Well, a couple of things about that. First of all, the bass we hear is closer to around 100, 200 hertz, and so that graph also has a different scale as to what we're used to seeing from places like Inner Fidelity. So that distortion, as you get down to the deep bass, well, it's kind of meaningless. I mean, down there with the dynamic driver, I think everything with a dynamic driver that does not have a big drop-off below about 50 hertz does end up having a fair bit of distortion in the deep bass. It's kind of irrelevant. There's nothing down there we really care about. It's the mid bass and above that we care about for the most part, unless you're listening to music which requires, deep pounding bass, and then you probably buy a pair of V motors anyway. And V motors are my preference if I do want to listen to club music, which is rarely, but they're the ones that tend to have the bass kick I like. Although I'm not a kind of bass music type person, so if you would disagree with me, no problem. I listen to jazz and acoustic music and some classical, so most of the time. So there we have that. Anyhow, onto the treble. That's speaking of jazz and acoustic music. Listening to piano, say Chopin, the piano seemed a little bit muffled compared to other headphones I have. I mean, not surprisingly, my usual headphones are planers and HD800s, but there seems to be something of a drop off in the treble around 4 kilohertz and above, where there's the usual treble spike at 9-10 kilohertz. And that treble spike isn't so noticeable unless you're listening to stuff with a lot of cymbals, I guess, because that's where they tend to have a fair bit of energy. But the spike, say you get in a pair of HD800s at 6.3 kilohertz, tends to be kind of the upper range of a lot of acoustic instruments, so which have most of their sound around the mid-range, kind of 1 to 3, 1 to 4 kilohertz. So the result is those instruments sound a little bit dark, a little bit muffled compared to other headphones. But that's where the mid-range gets interesting. The mid-range sounds rather thin. And what seems to have happened, going by the graphs, is that the mid bass has a strong kick around, say, 200 kilohertz, 200 hertz. I want to get my scale wrong at this rate, and that gives a strong kind of bass presence. And the lower mids above that, when you're getting up a few hundred, there's a bit of a drop off, and that makes the mid sound rather thin. And on top of that, there's more of a peak at 1 kilohertz kind of area, kind of upper and toward the upper mids, and so that makes the mids sound lighter and thinner. Although they do sound good, I kind of wish they were a bit darker sounding. So it feels like the peak is in the wrong. The mid bass peak should be higher, not lower. Always found a bit of a mid bass peak at 200 hertz to be a bit too much, and it seems that research from Harman actually seems to go with that, but. Anyhow, the result overall sound-wise, while they're very detailed, they're very accurate, very, very spacious sound, very, very spacious sound due to the angle drivers and these deep pads. Really, really precise, kind of precise imaging, detail, lots of detail, space, kind of like when I've overdamped my HD800s and now they're so ultra precise, it's kind of crazy. But the overall presentation is a bit kind of slightly off the mark. It feels like, actually a strange parallel. I have a little bit of interest in car design. I think anyone who's interested in gadgets has some interest in cars. They remind me of the Mazda RX-8. And the Mazda RX-8 is one of those cars that is, a brilliant car, but it looks like the design of the car, the outer design, was done by 3 different people. One who did the front, one who did the doors, and one who did the back. And each person had a different idea about how the car should look. It kind of looks discombobulated as a design. It's like the front end isn't speaking to the back as a design. Compare that to, say, like a Mercedes-Benz or some of the newer Japanese cars, which all look like one continuous flowing movement through the design of that. And the Sonys are more like that Mazda, where it's kind of the bass, the mids, and the treble aren't quite speaking to each other. Even though that they are very accurate and very they're very quite detailed, not high-end detailed. They're not going to be competing with the LCD3s, HD800s and stacks and all that kind of thing, but still very, very good, competent headphone, but still kind of almost there. It's as if the design is almost tuned correctly, but slightly off, like different mids, the bass, mids and treble were tuned by different people. But interestingly to note to that, I did talk about the design with the angle drivers, and you can see, as I turn them over, there's already started experimenting with putting a bit of foam in here. What this foam is a bit of a long story. A blogger called Rinchoi, who was measuring headphones, measured the Sony XBA3s, and he noticed that they had a bit of a ringing at 4 kilohertz. So he experimented with pulling out the foam and the nozzles and sticking in different kinds of foam in there. And what he came up with was that this microfiber cleaning foam, this stuff you buy in the supermarket, which will even strip paint off things, it's so good at cleaning, this stuff damps resonances at 4 kilohertz. So far I've just tried that, because I don't have anything really to hand for damping. And I found that it does seem to very slightly clean, very slightly help sticking it into this big gap here in helping with the mids. I mean, probably try other stuff, try different kinds of foam. I wish I had some proper acoustic foam here, actually. It would be interesting to experiment, but it's starting to open up the way for a bit of modding. Now, what's more is that when I was listening, not just to bass heavy music, but to all music, the cups were vibrating. I could feel vibration putting my hands on the cups. So I opened them up and had a look inside, and there's nothing there. There's no dampening, there's no nothing. So this could really open up potential for people to put some, say, Dynamat and other stuff in there, maybe a bit of acoustic damping material inside the cups and experiment with the sound. What I do know so far is that if I listen and put my thumbs over this port here, that the bass drops off. So this port obviously tunes the bass. And that the mid-range, likewise with the port at the top, if I put my finger over here while I'm listening, that sort of affects the mid-range in a different way, changes the mid-range tuning. So with that, and combined with, you know, this big gap in the cups, I mean, there's nothing in there. I mean, it's just hollow. That gives them a great potential for modding and tuning the sound and maybe even improving them. Now, given that I've already just seen a price today of landed in the US of about $450 through one company, holy heck, yeah! I mean, that with a bit of tuning, and you know, if you're one of those people who is inclined, maybe a recable. I mean, there's a bit of extra wire in the cups going to the drivers too. I mean, there's a lot of potential in these. I mean, they're very comfortable, beautiful, soft pads. My precious, sorry. The really comfortable, and the sound is kind of almost there. It does feel like it just needs a little bit more tuning, and it could be perfect. Not ultra detailed, but perfect. Could be tuned really, really well. And they could make for a really, really awesome pair of headphones. But still, I like them. From that perspective, I think someone already said it on Headfi. If you're coming from lower, if you're coming from a cheaper pair of headphones up to the Z7s, then you'll think probably think they're fantastic, especially if you like the increased level of detail, the precise imaging, all that kind of thing. If you're coming from my perspective, which is the HD800s, planers, all those kind of exotica, expensive headphones, you'll probably find them a bit of a disappointment because, you know, the slightly discombobulated sounds, the tonal balance, and all that kind of thing. But then again, if you already have high-end headphones and you're willing to spend on these, maybe get a pair, mod them, or get them modded, and they could be really fantastic. Since I do mention modding, let's have a look. We pop off the cable, which I'm now going to do very quickly. And to get the pads off, they do pop off, but there's a little screw hidden in them. Now let's see if I can show it on the video. Try to look at the viewfinder on the camera and at the same time look at what I'm doing. Okay, at the very bottom here, can you see that screw? I think you can see it. You just have to unscrew that and they'll pop off. So very quickly now, let's get this sticking out a bit further. Get one of, you know, any kind of, like an iFixit.com repair set. I don't think that's where I got these, but that kind of thing, which has a small, almost jeweler size screwdriver. So it is quite small Phillips screw, and we just pop that out. I don't want to do this, hopefully won't do this too many times. I don't want to wear out the threads. But that I hope I can gently get out without dropping. I already dropped it once. Put that there. And then to get the pads off, they just twist clockwise. From memory. Was it clockwise or anti-clockwise? That'd be right. Anyway, to have a look while we're here, they have, just you can see there, the catch. And if you look really closely at the catches, anti-clockwise. There we go, I'm silly. I meant anti-clockwise. Cups go clockwise. Pop that off. There we have the pads with the catches. And the screw pointed there. And that notch fits this notch here. See if that can get in focus. Sorry if it isn't in focus. The viewfinder doesn't really show that clearly whether it's in focus or not, with a bright light sitting above. But there you can see the angled drivers. So if I tilt that, You can really clearly see how angled the drivers are. See if I can get that bit around there. Tilt that around, have a good look. From another direction. So you can see that's this is the gap where I put my initial bit of foam. I don't know if it makes that much difference, but it seemed to help with the mids a little bit. I'm experimenting still. Try other stuff. But anyway, to get the cups off, you just basically take off all those screws and everything pops open. But there's that massive driver. That driver is pretty huge. Bit of damping in there already. So indeed, I actually look forward to modifying them and extracting what sound I can. And once I've done so, once a few people have done so, I'll maybe even do another video on modifying these and how far can we take this pair of Sony headphones. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my Sony MDR-Z7. Oh, what did you say? I want to make sure I get the name the right way around this time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to chatting to you in the comments and on HeadFi.